Commonwealth Bank outlines a bumper profit, a big win for the gig economy, and consumer confidence takes a hit. It's Thursday, the 10th of February 2022. Welcome to Fear and Greed, the business podcast that sets you up for a successful day. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael. I love your intro, but you're a bit dubious on whether it was the 10th of February.
Oh, I question it every day, and it's very early in the year to be questioning the date, isn't it? So it's not a great sign.
It is. Now, Michael, we had a pretty good review yesterday that you wanted to mention.
Yeah, I wanted to share this one just because we get a fair few reviews, but this one was just so succinct and quite sharp. A listener posted on Apple Podcasts and said, "Fear and Greed is the most engaging market and business podcast. I love it." And I just thought that really kind of sums it up nicely. And it's really nice to see people willing to put a little testimonial out there. And we really appreciate that kind of thing.
Oh, sure it does. It just gives us a real buzz if someone makes the effort and takes their time to do that. And it makes a big difference to our business as well, spreading the word. But yeah, it's really, really nice to get that sort of review.
Absolutely. And we certainly welcome all reviews on Apple Podcasts. And Spotify also recently turned on a star rating. So if you'd like to leave us a 5-star rating on any platform, it is very gratefully received. But first, we need to get on with the show and, of course, stay listening as well later for Sean's chat to Sonia Sawtell-Rickson, who is the Chief Investment Officer of superannuation fund Hester. A really interesting chat, that one. Sean, Commonwealth Bank yesterday surprised investors in a good way, always positive, with a massive half-year profit of $4.75 billion. That is a decent surprise.
It sure is. It was a great result, and Commonwealth Bank's share price jumped sharply, finishing up 5.7% yesterday. The massive profit for the 6 months to the end of December was up 23% on a year earlier, and much better than most people expected. The bank will also undertake a $2 billion share buyback and increased its half-year dividend. Commonwealth Bank, Michael, is starting to look much more like the organisation we knew, and sometimes loved, not always, before the pandemic. There was plenty of good news in the announcement yesterday. Home loan volumes are up more than 8%, and its mortgage book is growing faster than the average for the sector. Business banking, where it still lags National Australia Bank, is up, with lending volumes 13% higher. Household and business deposits were also up sharply. But there's always a but in banking. There was some bad news. Net interest margins, that's the difference between what a bank pays on deposits and receives on loans, fell sharply. Over the past week, both Westpac and ANZ have provided very similar commentary. Much of it is because many home buyers have moved on to fixed rate loans and banks make less money from those they do compared to variable rate mortgages. Also, the mortgage market is very, very competitive. I think everyone realises that. In fact, if you're not getting a good deal on your home loan right now, then you only have yourself to blame. Commonwealth Bank boss Matt Comyn was upbeat about the overall economic outlook. He said he expects interest rates to rise in August. Lenders tend to do better when rates are rising, so that should be good news for the bank, all other things being equal. The bank also wants to keep investing in technology and fintech startups, and that's an area where it probably has outperformed the other big three. All in all, a good day for Commonwealth Bank shareholders.
Yeah, it's interesting when you say that, Sean, about the mortgage market being so competitive and getting a good deal on your home loan. I did it probably 6 or 8 months ago and called up my bank, and I was amazed at how easy it was to get a better deal. The banks are obviously very, very keen to keep the customers that they have, and you really only have to ask.
The other thing is, I changed banks about 6 or 8 months ago, and I actually changed banks for my mortgage. It's much easier to do now than it used to be because of open banking. So no reason to not get a better deal.
Yeah, absolutely. So great day yesterday for Commonwealth Bank. Did the other banks get any shine from CBA's result?
Yes, definitely. Well, a little anyway. Westpac and National Australia Bank both finished up 2.4% yesterday, and ANZ's share price rose 1.7%. The Commonwealth Bank, though, is the golden child in that sector, and its valuation reflects that. Away from the banks, the S&P ASX 200 finished up 1% following a similar rise on Tuesday. The bourse closed yesterday at 7,257 points. It is slowly creeping back up. The tech stocks were the best performers. Computershare was among the absolute top, up more than 11% after impressing investors with its half-year announcement on Tuesday evening. Tyro Payments and Appen both rose 5%. The big miners fell back, though, with BHP down 1.7% and Fortescue off 3.6%. It came after China's market regulator warned iron ore information companies shouldn't fabricate and publish false information, which seems to be shorthand for stop talking about iron ore prices rising, even if they are.
Try and make sense of that one. All right, how did overseas markets perform, Sean?
Wall Street was up in early afternoon trading, Michael. Tech stocks again did well and have now recovered about half their losses of this year. Earnings season continues, and about 3/4 of the firms that have reported have beaten earnings estimates, according to Bloomberg. European markets were higher across the board on the back of some pretty good profit results and falling bond yields. German giant Volkswagen surged on talks that it may list its luxury brand Porsche. Brent crude remains stubbornly high, fetching more than $91 a barrel, and gold has been steadily rising and is trading at above $1,800 an ounce. Finally, the Aussie dollar is worth just under 72 US cents.
Okay, we'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Plenty to talk about today, Sean, and I mentioned this one at the start of the show. There was a win in the High Court yesterday for the gig economy and for all those businesses, really, that use contractors.
Yes, this is a big one, but like all High Court decisions, it takes a bit to get your head around. The High Court has held that 2 truck drivers who worked full-time for a lighting company for almost 40 years under a partnership arrangement were not employees entitled to minimum pay and conditions, such as superannuation and annual leave. It overruled a federal court decision that looked beyond the drivers' contracts and more at their working arrangements rather than the strict letter of the law as per the contract. And that's the crux of the decision. The High Court has emphasised exactly what a contract says as opposed to what actually happens and becomes commonplace in the workplace. The ruling means businesses can define employment by contract. Recently, Uber and Deliveroo have argued that regular contractors are not employees and thereby not entitled to minimum wages and conditions. This decision from the High Court supports that argument. It's beneficial, particularly to businesses that rely on online orders and fulfillment. It negates the argument that if a contractor works with the same company for years, that person should be entitled to conditions afforded employees, such as holiday pay. It's a big win for business, and particularly a lot of those tech companies.
Yeah, certainly is. Now, Sean, consumer confidence has taken a hit, presumably because of the Omicron outbreak.
That's right. Omicron played a role, but so too did concerns about inflation and rising interest rates. The Westpac Melbourne Institute Index has fallen 0.3%, with greater concern over family finances. Looking ahead, consumers are confident that the economy will continue to improve, and they're upbeat about the employment market. The survey shows that consumers expect interest rates to rise, with 2/3 of respondents forecasting a hike in rates over the next year or so, and a big chunk of those think it will be by more than 1%. That's pretty hefty. So, this week we've had readings of business and consumer confidence. The story is the same. Things went into a lull the past few weeks, but are expected to pick up again in coming months.
Okay, now Parliament was sitting again yesterday, and Sean, Labor's caucus meeting approved the Shadow Cabinet's religious discrimination legislation in Parliament.
Yes, they agreed to support the government's bill in the House of Reps and then move amendments in the Senate. Those amendments are expected to be on protections for transgender children, for gay and lesbian teachers, and they'll seek to remove the controversial statements of belief clause. This is causing a lot of controversy in Canberra. Now, question time was dominated by attacks on the government's record addressing abuse in Parliament House. Earlier yesterday, abuse victim and Australian of the Year Grace Tame told the National Press Club that she had received a threatening phone call from a senior member of a government-funded organisation asking for her word that she wouldn't say anything critical about Prime Minister Scott Morrison at the Australian of the Year Awards back on January 26. By the end of yesterday, the government had announced an investigation into that claim. Very serious. During Parliament yesterday, Labor also questioned Deputy Prime Minister Barnaby Joyce about texts he wrote 12 months ago calling Scott Morrison a liar and a hypocrite. And, of course, there are also discussions over allegations that former New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian sent a text calling the Prime Minister horrible, horrible, horrible. Things haven't changed much in Canberra. And finally, Michael, just quickly on national news, the number of COVID hospitalisations around the country continues to fall, even though there was an uptick in cases recorded yesterday. New South Wales recorded more than 10,000 cases and 20 deaths. Victoria reported 9,900 cases and 21 deaths. And Queensland reported almost 7,000 cases and 24 deaths.
Yeah, Queensland's worst day for deaths since the start of the pandemic. Now, Sean, we've spoken plenty about the boom in lithium stocks recently, but one of the country's biggest producers has really disappointed investors.
Yes, investors can't seem to get enough of lithium and other battery metals companies. Given the future's green, inputs into batteries have become hot property, no surprises there. But yesterday, Mineral Resources said the cost of exporting from Australia jumped 60% during the past year. It also had to manage the hard border in Western Australia, which is where it's based, and global supply chain disruptions. Its half-year profit fell from $519 million to just $19 million in the 6 months to the end of December. Not surprisingly, it didn't pay a dividend. The bad news needs to be tempered by the fact that the prices it received for lithium from its main mine were 3 times higher than a year earlier. As I said, lithium is in hot demand. Mineral Resources' share price eventually finished the day down more than 9%. It's still, though, one of the best performers on the ASX 200 over the past year.
Now, Sean, I know that one of your favourite online retailers is Temple & Webster. You have mentioned them a number of times, and if you walk through your house, it is largely furnished by Temple & Webster. Now, this online store has reported higher sales but lower profits.
Yes, pretty much everything you've just said is correct. I do shop at Temple & Webster, along with many others, it seems, particularly during lockdowns. In fact, the group said sales had jumped again in January because parts of the country went back into restriction mode. But the big problem for the group, and it's becoming a very common theme this earnings season, is higher shipping costs and some very challenging supply chain disruptions. Remember, this is a group that's tripled in size over the past 2 years and is ploughing money into marketing and brand building to keep up that growth rate. Of course, that's not helping the bottom line either, at least not yet. Overall, revenue for Temple & Webster was up 46% on the back of a 1/3 jump in the number of active customers, but net profit was down 40%. Investors like the story, and its share price jumped almost 9% yesterday, though it's still well down on its peak last year.
Now, this is a pretty cool story, Sean. A Queensland-based company has won the plaudits of US President Joe Biden.
It has. Tritium produces fast chargers for electric vehicles, and yesterday it said it would build a new factory in Tennessee, in the US. Joe Biden, speaking next to Tritium CEO Jane Hunter, hailed the decision as aligning with his vision to electrify transportation and support manufacturing jobs. Now, the new site will be able to produce as many as 30,000 fast chargers a year. It's a very, very hot company at the moment, Tritium. It's listed on NASDAQ in the US, not the ASX. And on the announcement yesterday and following President Biden's comments, its share price jumped nearly 40%. Great little company in Queensland, been going for 20 years, and it's just in the right space at the right time.
Okay, what's making headlines in today's news media?
Well, Michael, the Financial Review is reporting that the country's spy chief has warned of the risk of foreign meddling in the federal election, revealing ASIO recently foiled a plot by an overseas government to plant candidates into an Australian parliament. Director General of Security Mike Burgess also said spies were using dating apps to gather top secret information.
All right, running through a few of the other stories around today, the Financial Review is running a story that says vaccine effectiveness with COVID is at its peak 15 to 30 days after the second jab, according to a study published in The Lancet. From then, it wanes to have non-effectiveness after 7 months, but there is a difference between being protected from infection and being protected from illness. Protection against severe illness was much better maintained, which is good news.
It is. Qantas has reported a spike in international bookings and searches since the government said it would reopen international borders on 21 February. In fact, bookings doubled on the day after the reopening announcement. Bookings are strongest out of the United States and the United Kingdom, as well as South Africa, India and Canada.
That must be very, very welcome news to everybody in the tourism and travel sectors.
Yes, they must be relieved.
Now, Sydney Airport is no longer listed on the ASX after the Supreme Court of New South Wales approved the purchase of the infrastructure business. This is one that we've been talking about for a while now. It means 2 top 20 companies, Sydney Airport and Afterpay, have left the bourse in just the last fortnight.
And Bapcor, which operates Autobarn, AutoPro and Burson car parts chains, said while sales were down in early January, things have rebounded with mechanics back buying again. This is a company who parted ways with its long-term CEO late last year. Now, the reason given by the chair was to introduce a more contemporary approach to management. whatever that means. The new boss, Noel Meehan, is the old CFO, though he hasn't been at Bapcor for long. For the December half year, the group announced a small rise in revenue, but a 15% drop in profit. People didn't like that one. Bapcor's share price closed down 7% yesterday.
Okay, what's the key overseas news this morning, Sean?
Anthony Fauci, US President Joe Biden's chief medical advisor, said the combination of vaccinations, treatments and prior infections means the full-blown pandemic phases of COVID-19 are almost over. Speaking to the Financial Times, Dr. Fauci said he hoped there would be an end to all pandemic-related restrictions in the coming months, including mandatory wearing of masks. He's a man that's well worth listening to. The Philippines is heading to an election on May 9 with a campaign kicking off this week. Now, the favourite is someone called Ferdinand Marcos. Yes, the son of the former leader and dictator of the same name. It's been 35 years, Michael, since Ferdinand Marcos Sr. and his mother, for that matter, she of the shoe fetish, were booted out of power. Mr. Marcos Jr., known as a polarising figure, has vowed to unify the country. It's going to be fun to watch, Michael.
Certainly will be, from a distance.
Absolutely. And there have been several media reports about Beijing locals buying up and reselling Winter Olympics memorabilia. At times, close to 1,000 people have queued outside the Beijing Arts and Crafts Mall to buy souvenirs. Not surprisingly, the most popular is the official panda bear mascot, Bing Duen Duen. I've been looking at that a lot in the last few days, and I had no idea its name was Bing Duen Duen.
Well, no one ever really remembers the names of the mascots, do they? Can you remember the names of the Sydney Olympics mascots?
I remember what they looked like, but I don't remember the names. No, sorry.
There you go. I wouldn't feel too bad about not knowing the name of Bing Duen Duen in that case. Now, up next is the Fear and Greed Daily interview. And today, Sean, you're speaking to Sonia Sawtell-Rixon, who is the Chief Investment Officer of superannuation fund Hester.
Yes, it's a very broad conversation, a little bit about investing, of course, but lots about other topics such as the role of the environment investing, women in finance. We spoke about all sorts of things. Really interesting interview.
Yeah, that's up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Thursday, the 10th of February 2022. And make sure you're following the podcast and join us online on LinkedIn, Twitter and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.